Hi, everybody. Hi, welcome to Lifestyle Telemedicine, Facebook Live, etc. Wondering where you guys are all coming in from. Let us know. It's so exciting to see you. We are here with the awesome, I'm Dr. Kim Scheuer, and we have the awesome Dr. Niki Davis and the incredible John Pierre. And I'll start by introducing John Pierre. I'm coming in from Colorado. Niki, where are you coming from?
Salt Lake City, Utah, so not too far
Yay,
from
and JP?
Colorado.
Nice.
I'm on the road in Los Angeles.
Yay! So, John Pierre, for people who don't know him, is a nutrition and fitness consultant whose passions are compassion, love, and ahimsa. He's a pioneer in brain building field for the elderly, which I need, and has had more than 35 years in nutrition and fitness fields. He's developed cutting-edge programs with a blend of science and ancient modalities. He's authored books, cooking DVDs, exercise videos, numerous online programs. His Heart of Service is a nonprofit called Living with Harmony that works to heal, inspire, and transform the lives of people, animals, the planet through planet-based living, which we love, and we're going to find out about. Yay, planet-based living. And you can find out more about him at www.johnpierre.com and livingwithharmony.org. So welcome, everybody. We got people from Ohio and other places. I can't see some other places, but I'm excited to bring everybody in. So JP, what is planet-based living and ahimsa, and how are they connected?
Well, good. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you both superstars for doing the great work you do. Planet-based living is a term that Living with Harmony, my nonprofit, created, and it's basically, if you just think in terms of veganism, it's really what veganism is about. It's not only what we're taking in from a dietary standpoint, but it's our thoughts, the way we think, and what are we purchasing? Are we purchasing organic? Are we purchasing fair trade? Are the choices that we make in life not only for ourselves, but for the better of humanity, for the animals, and for the planet? It's really about making conscientious choices for the well-being of all expressions of life. And speaking of all expressions of life, that's really what the term ahimsa means. It's compassion and reverence for all expressions of life. It's being kind with not only your thoughts and your words, but your actions that you take. And ahimsa is really, it's a Sanskrit term. So it's an ancient word. And it's, when you look at yoga, and I've been involved in the yoga field for almost as long as I have been in the plant-based world. So 40 years. When I've taught in India, that's one of the main tenets that we teach is ahimsa, which is really one of the main tenets of the 8 limbs of yoga. What most people, when they think of yoga, they think just of the asanas or the postures, but it's really more of that. It's the more mental and spiritual aspect. And that's the most important tenet really in yoga is the ahimsa: do no harm, be compassionate, be kind, and be loving.
Yeah, in this world, we absolutely need that. And I think it's so interesting how you can connect being kind and loving to your own health, to lifestyle, to the planet's health, and everything like that. Can you, and especially in this world with stress and conflict and disconnection, how does choosing compassion help in all those different ways?
Well, when you're more compassionate, when your vessel, your being is more loving and kind, your cortisol level goes down, oxytocin, serotonin, feel-good hormones go up. You're much more calm. You're just more at ease. Your breathing changes too. You're not doing as much upper chest breathing, anxiety breathing. You're doing more nasal breathing and belly breathing. You're more in a state of calm, steady, mentality all the time. And every time that you're doing actions that are loving and kind, not only are you reinforcing kindness and love to yourself, but you're also emulating, you're showing this to other people. Other people are seeing this energy. I can remember I was working with a client that had Down syndrome. He was a young boy. And every time we would walk outside, just habitually, I would always pick up garbage and just put it in a bag. Just didn't even think of it. It's just what I always did. I always had my backpack and a little bag and stuff. And one day, I don't know, a day, 2 days, I don't know, during our next session, he started doing it. And he started emulating what I saw me doing good, and he started doing it. So it's kind of just this ripple effect that the more loving and kind you are, the more that people around you are going to get that energy of love and kindness. It's kind of like the revert. It's like a virus, a virus gets transmitted from person to person to person, right? Well, this is just something that's positive. It's an energy that gets transmitted to other people and other beings too.
I love that. It actually reminds me of my dad. My dad used to say, when you're out driving in traffic and someone cuts you off or somebody does something, instead of having this immediate reaction of wanting to, yell or flip them off or something like that, he said, just imagine that this person is, their family has an emergency and they're off somewhere and they need to be somewhere quickly to take care of someone, or just imagine that there's something else that's really important that they're headed to, so that you can have some of that, more of that compassion for that person. And it really changed how I feel when I'm out driving on the road.
Yeah.
Right. I always think the same thing. I always think, wow, that person's probably going to rescue an animal right now. I think it, in a positive. And then also, I've worked with enough clients, I've worked with abused women for 30 years that I've learned that you never know somebody's story just for your first couple minutes of interaction. You don't know why they're acting the way they do. And I've known for all the women that I've worked with, when I hear their story after I get to know them, I am just amazed they're even functioning. I'm just shocked that these women are even functioning. So when somebody is a little bit, snooty or something, I'm just sending them love. I'm not making a judgment on them. I have no animosity toward them. And that's just not in my being who I am.
Yeah. And it also reminds me of, so I have a 12-year-old son, and sometimes if there's a kid at school that is saying things to him that he doesn't like, and he feels like he's being treated poorly, we talk about, well, what do you think could be happening in his life that's causing him to act this way? And then we're bringing in that compassion and thinking about, you're like, I talked to him, like, you're very lucky to have a lot of people who love you and a place to live and food to eat. And imagine if you didn't have all those things, you might act differently. So,
Absolutely.
Boy, this really affects us in so many different places.
Yeah, and that's, working in the women and children shelters, when you get to know these women, a lot of them would appear completely normal. And even when I've worked with, CEOs and stuff that are very wealthy and famous, once you get to know them and you hear what the trials and tribulations they've been through, it really makes you understand why they act the way they do. So for me, it's just a matter of, I think I've mentioned this to you before, Kim, is that when you're squeezed, what comes out? That's a reflection of who you are. And I remember I was teaching at one conference once, and this is 20 something years ago. And I was selling exercise bands at my booth. And I don't know, I get them for $3 or $4 and sell them for $5. So let's say you make $1. And somebody came up to the booth and said, oh, I saw these for 50 cents cheaper at Walmart, and I was like, oh, okay. And my first reaction was, which I said to the lady, I said, ma'am, I'd like to give you this exercise band. So I'd like to give it to you as a gift. So it wasn't, I wasn't upset that the lady was trying to, deprive a vegan vendor of making an extra 50 cents. It was, oh, wow, this person must really be under a financial crunch that they're going to argue or debate about a 50-cent price. And so when you're squeezed, stressed, what comes out is what's inside of you. And if you don't like that, well, that's even more of a reason to start working on your inner self and making sure when you are squeezed, you're happy with the reactions that you have.
Yeah, you told me that when you're squeezed, you put out love. And I just love that.
Well, that's because that's what's inside. So it's like when you squeeze an orange, the only thing that can come out is orange juice, because that's what's inside the orange. It's just that it takes time for many people to develop that love and compassion inside. It's work. It's like fitness training and nutritional work. It just takes time because we're not raised that way. We're raised in an environment where there's constant negativity 24/7 with the news and social media, parents, family members, teachers, friends, constantly bombarding you with negativity. And then that morphs into you. And so if you're not conscientious of that, if you don't understand that, that's when we run into problems.
So as a sensitive person who's concerned with what's happening in the world, there's stress, there's conflict and all that. What's a tip that you can use to teach somebody, like to teach me how to be more positive, more loving. And I like the idea of what you had said about thinking of somebody going to rescue an animal.
Yeah.
Can you give me some?
For me, what I work with clients first on, and it's so funny because, I've been teaching for 40 years, been vegan for 40 years and teaching, well, just about that long. I've been teaching maybe 39 years. And, obviously nutrition and fitness is something that I teach, of course, and my background being in geriatrics, enhancing cognitive functioning. But the main thing that I work with clients on really is developing that mindset of just being a more compassionate, loving person. And I start with my clients with their words. And I always say that, sticks and stones, they can break your bones, but words, they can tear your heart apart. So be very conscientious of the words that you allow into your fertile garden, and then be conscientious of the words that you allow out. Because when you say something, especially if it's negative, it's like an arrow being released. You can't call it back. Once it's out there, it's out there. So you want to be very careful of the words that you say, because they're an energy and they're powerful. And just on the opposite spectrum, you also want to be careful of the words that you allow in. So every time that you watch movies that are violent, you listen to violent music, you watch, anything that's violent or engage in any violence, that's morphing into you. It's you have to be very conscientious. Like, I've never seen pornography. And so one of the reasons that I took a stance, a long time ago when I was a kid, is I just didn't want those energies in me, that type of imaging all the time. Because then when I go to talk to somebody, if I'm talking to a woman or anybody, you don't want those images, because you want to be able to connect with somebody's spirit, right? You don't want to be thinking about 3 hours or 4 hours of pornography somebody was watching, because that's morphing into you, right? And then becomes another addiction. And I have a lot of clients that have, these people are addicted not only to food and drugs, but they're affected to social media and violent video games and pornography and things like that. So the first thing I work with is watch your environment, what you are seeing and hearing, and then be very conscientious of what words you release, because that's not only going to affect you, but it's also going to affect that person that you're talking to, especially children, because children are so hyper conscious of everything, and especially of their parents or somebody they admire, their words that they're saying. And so those words need to be based on love and compassion. And then one step prior to that is get Post-it notes, and put Post-it notes up around your home that have words like be kind, be loving, be accepting, things like that, because that's starting to feed your brain with positive stuff.
I love that. Well, JP, I would love to just kind of reverse a little bit and go back to the beginning of, how did you get into all of this? You talked about doing some of this work for 35, 40 years. I'm just curious where all of this started and kind of how you got interested in this.
Well, I was always very sensitive and hypersensitive, and especially with animals. Birds would hit our window and fall down and get stunned, and I'd run outside and I would kneel as a little kid and just pray to the bird. I'd be praying, and the bird would fly away, and I thought I was Dr. Dolittle. I thought as a young little kid, like I was doing this magic, and that even motivated me even more. But I really started ultimately in high school. Senior year, the 2 oral reports that I did was women's rights and animal rights, and that was 1983. So I really started kind of getting into more reading of this information. PETA had just came out. People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I think it was their newsletter. We didn't have the internet back then, but their information was just coming out back then, in 81 or 82, something like that. So I started getting into about senior year in high school when I switched to a vegan diet and lifestyle. And, I was also very interested in always being a source of how could I help? Where can I help? And so women's rights, animal rights was really big. And then as time went on a little bit, kind of around that time, maybe a couple months later, I started also getting more into the geriatric population and, sensitivity to them. And then, of course, all the work that I did with the homeless in Chicago. I used to collect duffel bags from people, and I'd fill it up with food. I'd get thermoses and that I would give to them, the homeless people, with hot tea and stuff. And I would take the L downtown to areas carrying all these huge bags as a kid. And then I would, feed the homeless. So I think it's just, being sensitive and kind and compassionate. You're just always seeing where can you be of service. That was an important thing to me. Where could I be of service in this world? How could I make the world better, a little less suffering, a little bit more love and care?
And so then how did you end up getting started? What was kind of some of the first things that you did as an adult
In regards to what?
in regards to your career?
Oh, well, I started taking more and more classes on nutrition, and so I used to go to a lot of different the Animaloid seminars. And I remember seeing Dr. Clapper in 1985, the National Alliance for Animals Conference.
Wow.
He had just really, I had just been vegan a couple years, and he probably had been vegan a few years too. And he was just out there getting information out. And he was fascinating to get his information and learn more about the dietary aspect. And I was also in high school, I was an athletic trainer. So for me, it was like, wow, this information could help, athletes that you're working with. And as I was transitioning to my diet to, we didn't have processed foods back then, so it was kind of lucky. But as I was doing it, you feel more energy, you recover faster. It's like, wow, this is great. I can help athletes. I can share this information with more and more people to help them too. My mindset was always like, how can I be of service? How can I help, people's lives improve? So it was always just constantly transitioning. But I read a lot of different books. We didn't have any DVDs or internet back then, so it was a lot of VHS videos that I was using, and then a lot of periodicals, a lot of different, a lot of the medical journals, physician and sports medicine. There was the dietetic and nutritionist journals and stuff that I'd read, and then lots of different books. And then I think going to seminars really helped a lot, because all these seminars that they were out there was a lot of chiropractic seminars. I was working at a health food store, so we always had connections to all the chiropractic and dietitian and nutrition seminars that I went to.
So you've worked with, over the years, I mean, you've built your career to working with some extremely famous people, but you also work with everyday people, and you work with aging adults, celebrities, etc. And you help them stay strong and independent as they get older. What are some of the suggestions for somebody in their 50s, 60s, 70s to stay healthy for themselves and for the planet?
Yeah, so my background's in geriatrics, so I really created the first brain building programs in the United States using a plant-based diet, probably 35 something years ago in Chicago. And so those programs were based on not only a plant-based diet. We used to do trips to Trader Joe's with the bus with the seniors, and I would help them, navigate what to get to supplement their diet, and then try to get the cafeterias where they lived at to change their diet a little bit. The fitness modalities that I would do were always important. And then the love and compassion. I just want, in my first book, The Pillars of Health, that's everything that I do with clients, is everything: the dietary, the nutrition, the enhancing cognitive functioning. Was there a specific area you wanted to focus on?
I'd like you to tell us just what works, what you found works the best. And
obviously a plant-based diet for sure, from getting the vehicle working internally, getting that far working perfectly. A couple different supplements I would always use. Back in the day, when we didn't have as much science, I was using lecithin as a source of choline for seniors too, to form acetylcholine, so their brain was functioning and nervous system was firing. I used to use a lot of different fibers products for them. Most of them were psyllium-based products. Most of it was dietary. I was actually encouraging, way back in the day, I had seen the research just starting on blueberries, and this was probably, 30 years ago. So I was always encouraging them to include berries in their diet. From an exercise standpoint, just to keep the heart so it's, has a better stroke volume, I wanted them to always do some basic aerobic activities, 12 to 15 minutes a day. But I wanted them to do coordination exercises. So a lot of ping pong, tennis. Back in the day, we didn't have pickleball, but we had badminton. Anytime you're using rackets and balls, you're really stimulating your brain and your nervous system. And the seniors would invite me to play table tennis at the retirement homes. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to be just like hitting the ball like this. When I went to play with them, they were standing 6 feet back from the table, smashing them right past me every time. I couldn't keep up. So it was really cool to know that you could be in their 70s, 80s, and 90s and still have a highly functioning nervous system. And it was really, it taught me a lot back in the day. So I would do those types of exercise, a lot of fall prevention programs I did for them. So I do a lot of balance stuff. And then back then, I wasn't doing as much love and compassion. I was doing some, but not nearly as much as I do today, because I had learned so much back then, 35 years ago too. So it was a progression. And then one of the main things that I always tried to instill in the seniors was that at the retirement homes, literally there was Banjo Joe, a guy that would play the banjo and bingo. That's all they had. So I created this curriculum where I'd come in once, twice, sometimes 3 times a week to retirement homes or senior centers and do these brain building activities where we actually did classes for an hour on stimulating the brain. And then I would do a boot camp where I'd bring out agility ladders and all sorts of different balls and things to stimulate their nervous system and coordination. And then we would also focus a little bit on strength training. One of the big things that I had always endorsed was getting out of your chair as much as possible. Do not sit in your chair for long periods of time. And that's what they did, unfortunately, at retirement homes and senior centers. So I would have them constantly walking as much as they possibly could. Because, once that sarcopenia kicks in, it's like osteopenia. It's just a progression. It's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. It's like you're in a canoe and there's holes being put in the canoe and water's coming in. It's like you're going to get to a point where there's no returning back to normal. So I always explain to them, it's kind of like this little bit of a battle that you have to fight every day to get stronger. You have to stress your muscles and your bones and your nervous system every day a little bit. It doesn't have to be extreme, but you have to stress it out. And also back then, we were starting not to see as much research like on brain-derived neurotrophic factor, but we know that that's kind of like a fertilizer for your brain. And it helps neuronal communication. So I was really big into doing a lot of mental exercises, even when they would exercise. So a lot of times, like if I'm working with a client, they may be doing some simple exercises as a warm up for me, but I'm saying to them, hey, what's 7 times 3? What's 6 minus 2? What's 8 plus 4 minus 2? And they're doing a physical activity as they're trying to compute these things mentally.
That's so awesome. Cool. Wow. I can imagine that if somehow we could incorporate this into all of the United States or beyond, boy, what a difference it would make for aging seniors.
I've seen access to that. I've seen people who supposedly had dementia. Their kids would send them to me they were in, I think, 83 years of age. And, when I would see them a couple times a week, in between that, I would give them homework. So basically every day they're doing brain training, and their brain's ability to work was almost as fast as mine. And it was remarkable what they could do, the stuff that they could do just through training. So I've learned that I never give up on a client, and it's just a constant state of always, giving them a little bit more, not to overwhelm them, but just a tiny bit more to keep pushing them up. And the stuff that I've seen is quite remarkable. I mean, really, especially people who have Parkinson's or supposedly dementia.
Well, can you give us a couple of cases, that are especially interesting and incredible transformations that you've seen?
Yeah. So one client that had, was on I think it was like Aricept, or was one of those for dementia. And their family was very concerned about her. And she was 80. She was in her 80s. And her diet was just kind of a typical diet. And I start working with that. But I did a lot of what I would do in that hour is we would do about 5 to 7 minutes of exercise and balance, coordination skills, some strength training. Then we'd stop, have her sit down, and we'd do some brain training. And I'll give you an example. I will actually put my stopwatch on, and I'll give you an example. So one of the things that I would do with her is I'd say, okay, we're going to count from 1 to 10. But what I want you to do is spell the numbers. So she'd have to say ONETWOTHRE until she got to 10. So we'll do it now. We can just try it. The audience can try it, and both of you can try it. And just go as fast as you can to count. And I'm going to say start. And when I say stop, that's when this 83-year-old has finished. Okay. Because I want you to see how fast she is. So ready? We're just going to go ONETWOTHRE. Ready and go.
O-N-E, 2-W-O,
T-H-R-E,
T-H-R-E-E-F-O-U-R,
F-O-U-R,
And
F-I-V-E.
stop.
F-I-V-E-S-I-X.
So she finishes in about 5 seconds, 1 to 10. So it's
Wow.
ONETWOTHREFOUR. Now that's 83, supposedly with dementia, obviously not doing a vegan diet or exercising a ton. And when she started, it took forever, which is normal. It took, she was at O-N-E, real slow, normal, like we'd all be. But it was the repetition, the homework that I gave her, and constantly seeing her, because see, we'd exercise 5 to 7 minutes, then we'd sit and we'd do these drills. Then I'd get her back up. We'd exercise 5 to 7 minutes and do some other drills. And so then when we were done, I'd say, okay, here's your homework till I see you next. And she would have to do different exercises. And she would always say to me, she goes, JP, she goes, when I go to bed, I'm thinking about these things all the time. She was constantly thinking about it, which was completely the opposite of what she used to do, because she used to just not do anything. So she was, I have a lot of people that I've had that have gone through those types of growth and changes, not only from a mental standpoint, but from like fall prevention or strength training or weight loss, things like that.
Are there any celebrities you can tell us about that you've worked with?
Well, they're on my website, at least the ones who wanted to do endorsements. But one of the interesting was when I was training Ellen DeGeneres, when I worked so much with different women, and a lot of times when we're doing cardio, kickboxing and things, I'm always doing affirmations, you're a strong, powerful woman. And I'd say to Ellen a lot, you're a wrecking machine. You're so strong and powerful. And as we started doing that, that was changing her. And I remember I started to train her to do knuckle push-ups, because one of the things that happens a lot is when I start working with women, they'll say to me, hey, is it okay if when we do push-ups, I do girl push-ups? And I always say, oh, you're going to do girl push-ups? And I say, yeah. And I say, great. And I go down and I do a knuckle push-up. I said, so you're going to do a knuckle push-up, right? And they said, no, I meant on my knees. I was like, well, that's not a girl push-up. I said, a girl push-up's on your knuckles, because I'm changing their mindset. So what I did with Ellen is we would start just at first holding a plank, right? And once we can get the 30 seconds, then I knew she was good with that. So we would do 1,000 on your knuckles and 29 seconds palm. And then the next time, 2 seconds and 28, etc. And then eventually when we can hold that plank for 30 seconds to a minute, then we start with a push-up on her knuckles, and we just do a mini one, right? And so she got so good at that she went on the Jay Leno show. And she said to Jay, she goes, my guy that I work with, she always used to call me your guy, he said, I'm a wrecking machine. So that in itself was huge, because it really got into her brain that she was a strong, powerful woman, wrecking machine. And then she told Jay how she could do, knuckle push-ups. And he said, really? Can you show us? And she's like, oh, no. And the audience went crazy. And the Jay Leno show, and she stood up. I think she took off her vest, and she just cranked them out one after another. So that was a lot of fun. And that's a kind of a common thing. It doesn't matter if it's a celebrity, who it is, but yeah, lots of different celebrities, but they're no different than anyone else. And you get more people like hearing that stuff. Like on my site, johnpierre.com, Ellen had filmed me training her staff and her. And so I guess she put it online, and somebody said, hey, I saw you online. I said, you did? I didn't know about it. I didn't know what Ellen was going to do with it. And so then people said, put it on your website. So it's on the website, johnpierre.com. You'll see me training her and her staff, and you'll see the different exercises, and you'll see her doing push-ups. She was doing them on her palms there, but she always did them on her knuckles. So that was somebody, lots of different, they're all up there. At least a lot of them are up there, but a lot of them come to me as plant-based people, and I kind of fine tune things. Or some of them, they're vegetarian, then we switch and transition them to a pure vegan diet. And then some of them come to me vegan, and then we transition them, a pure plant-based diet. And then we transition them to more of the mentality of the vegan diet, vegan lifestyle, kindness and love and compassion in the environment, things like that.
So JP, there's 2 questions that I figure we should answer. Mark asked how old you are. I think you're the same age as me.
Yeah, I'm 60.
Oh, I'm older than you. Yay.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, so I'm 60. I have to be able to keep up with a lot of my clients that are, definitely half my age, especially when I'm training them. So, I keep the basic conditioning, but nothing extreme. And my diet is just a, typical whole food, plant-based diet, basically SOS free, salt free, all free, sugar free. I don't freak out if I'm having some salsa or something, there's some sodium in there. But yeah. And then, I don't know. I don't really do anything really odd with my diet. I use some different superfoods. There's a company called Health Force, and I really love their product called Vitamin Mineral Green, and one called Greener Grasses. When I'm on the road traveling, which is a lot, and I don't get as many greens, I use that because it's just organic dried greens. They're just basically just dehydrated and blended up into a powder. So I use that. I do smoothies a lot. I take some basic supplements, but I don't do anything too extreme that I think. I'm not a workout fanatic. I don't have to outshine my clients. I work with military or extreme kind of if you want to say military and law enforcement people, but my job isn't to have to show them up, but I have to be able to have basic conditioning with them.
Yeah. And so Lindsay asks, do you do virtual appointments for nutrition and diet?
Sure.
And exercise? Yeah.
And I work with, there's a lot, I work a lot with physicians that are my clients, plant-based physicians, regular physicians, a lot of, at people, maybe fitness instructors. And I work a lot too in the trauma field. Actually, the trauma field is where I do focus a lot of my time. I still go to certifications or classes on trauma with the top people. I teach at those conferences. I think one of the ones I mentioned to you that I was teaching at was one on vicarious trauma, which is where a therapist is just seeing client after client after client, right? And they're absorbing all that energy. And so I share with them ways to counter absorbing all that energy and how it's unethical to go from one client to the next without taking a break and mentally cleansing yourself, because you're carrying the trauma from one client to the next, and that's not fair. So I work with clients like that. And then I work also with, people like us, just regular people too. Yeah. And I do it via Zoom, FaceTime, in person, if I'm in that area or they're in my area too. And a lot of times, like if I'm working with physicians like yourself, I'm like a supplement to what you're doing. I may help people just stay more motivated and focused, and, give them different ideas that, share with them different ideas, and mainly be there to help coach them. Because one of the things that I found, when I've lived with celebrities before and I've been very successful with that person, it's because I'm with them 24/7. I've worked as a sober companion for people. I've traveled all over the globe with that. And when you're with somebody all the time, that's very helpful because you're able to really, get inside of their life, and they're constantly seeing you, and you're always, fine tuning what they're doing. So once I did that, I was like, gosh, how could I do this for the normal people that can't afford this? And so then I start doing programs where I work with people, not only virtually, but I'm texting them at least 2 to 3 times a day. And that's very helpful too.
As somebody who, I met you at a recent conference, and you did that 1, 2, 3 while we were exercising. The ONETWOTHRE.
Oh, right.
It was like, it was great. So I actually went to www.johnpierre.com and emailed him and said, can I work with you? Because I wanted to learn from you so I can work with my patients. And what a fabulous experience. First of all, it's affordable. One-on-one's affordable, but if not, there's packages that you put out there, some classes that you can take on your website, which are great. So and I'm learning so much, not only about, I'm getting stronger, I'm feeling better, but as you said, you bring the love and the compassion in there. And it's being able to bring that, which is another pillar of lifestyle medicine, all the pillars into my everyday life, which hopefully will help my patients. But that's great. And thank you. So
we're all spokes on the wheels. What I say, we're all important. It doesn't matter. Just like when I can be living with a celebrity or traveling with a celebrity, and I'm going to give just as much attention to the maids and the housekeeping staff as I am them, because they're no different than anyone else. I literally do not see those folks any different than the celebrity. Nothing. Yeah. So I think we're all there to help and share information, but we're all important. So just because somebody's an MD, they might not have the training in trauma, right? Or they might not have the training in essential oils or music therapy. So, you can't be expected to do that, right? You know, I mean, look how long it took you to be an MD, but you know, how much training did you get in, you know, like brain spotting or EMDR or, you know, internal family system? It's a whole different system, you know. Same thing with athletics, you know. Are you supposed to understand how to train a client with medicine ball training or plyometrics and stuff? No. So we source out and we just realize that we're a spoke on the wheel. We're not the most important, we're an important part.
Yeah.
And that's what's nice with you, Kim, is that you see that, you know, and you see that, you know, you have something to contribute, but it doesn't mean another practitioner can't contribute too. I think part of the problem is that it's, you know, people have big egos.
Yeah.
And so like, I never once ever saw myself as any different than anyone else. As a matter of fact, I always tell people when they come up to me or anything, I said, hey, I'm just like you. I just have some knowledge you don't, but you have knowledge that I don't.
Yep. So we have some more questions. Niki, you want to read some of those, or can you see those?
Sure, yeah. So we have from Instagram, what is the one piece of advice you could give to someone starting out as a new vegan?
Oh, a new vegan. Okay. Well, one, be very conscientious of the information you take in, because you're going to have lots of people online. They're going to tell you all sorts of crazy ideas about why you can't be vegan. You know, they're going to be filling you up with misinformation. So try to keep getting your main information for people like the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. You know, people have accurate information, and that, you know, MDs or people have done this for a while. Because when you go online, everybody thinks they're an expert, right? And the information they have is unbelievable. So just be conscientious of that and only look for good information. I think Dr. Greger, you know, with Nutrition Facts, I think he has such great information out there. And I always have, since Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine has been around, I've been promoting them. I've taught at their International Brain Spotting or Brain Conference, which was really a great one. So I really love their information. And then, like, for instance, if you're working with physicians like you two, I mean, that's so important that somebody can give you accurate information, and that you've been vegan or plant-based for a while. You have, you know, you've gone through it. You understand what you're going to feel like when your gut changes because you ate too many beans or you had too much fiber. So just be careful that you don't take information from people who don't have a clue about what they're saying, which is unfortunately most of the internet.
And, you know, you certainly can come to any of the docs at Lifestyle Telemedicine to get some information, because actually, if you are doing this and switching over, you have to be careful if you're especially on certain medicines like blood pressure medicines or diabetic medicines, and we need to adjust those down as you get healthier and healthier. There's two questions from Jim O I think are interesting. One is, I'm doing Kegel exercises for stress incontinence. Can you suggest some weight-bearing muscle building exercises that don't make stress incontinence worse? And the second, which I think is related, is it's not the question, it's explaining this. It's incontinence of urine following prostate cancer surgery, which there are so many people in this world that go through that. Do you have any advice on weight-bearing muscle building exercises that can help that? And that don't make it worse. Sorry, that don't make it worse.
I mean, everyone's different. So everyone can handle exercises different. So you have to find what works for you. Some people, like, I'm a big believer in like vibration plates for people for building bone density and also for stimulating muscle. But some people, they can't handle that. I'm also just a big believer in, depending if somebody has high blood pressure or not, but isometric training, where you're just contracting the muscle against the force. It really depends on what I tell clients is you have to experiment and see what affects you, what doesn't. Because I have a lot of clients that can't jump rope at all because of that issue. And so we don't do jumping rope, but I might put them in a pool and have them run in water. So they're getting that fast footwork all the time for their nervous system and the ability to lift their foot up. So it's not the same bone density, but I'm training their nervous system still, and I'm still getting their lymphatic system going, because I'll put a weight vest or a vest on them that makes them float, and they can still run in the water. So they're still developing their cardiovascular system and not as much bone density, but their nervous system. So, I mean, you just have to experiment with what affects you.
And the vibration plate, low vibration, correct?
Yeah, you know, that's a good point, because, you know, a lot of people have osteopenia or osteoporosis, and they can fracture them, you know, a bone with the high vibration. So you do have to be careful with that. And on the other end of things, I love rebounding too for people. I don't think there's many things that are better for their lymph system and in terms of their just general health than, you know, rebounding. The only thing I don't care about rebounding is it's not great for the bone density, right? So you kind
That's
of have
actually
to,
what I was going to ask.
yeah.
Yeah,
So what,
because
just like
I also
swimming.
love rebounding.
Yeah, like swimming is great, but when you get bone density is only when you're pushing off the wall, right, to kick. You get a little stress when you're stressing the muscles doing certain exercise in the water, but you just have to work around to see what you can what you can do. But the main thing is that you want to move your body as much as possible, and you don't want to say, okay, I did my 45 minutes in the morning, I'm done. No, because I'm concerned about the rest of the 16 hours. What are you doing? How often are you getting up and down out of your chair? How many times today did you lift your arms over your head? How many times did you rotate? How many times have you squat down? So that 1 hour in the morning or whenever you do it, that's great. Keep doing it. But you want activity woven throughout the day.
Yeah. And I think, when I talk to my patients about that, it's making sure that it's something that doesn't feel like exercise, that like you're checking something off the list, that it really is just built into your day. So you don't really have to think about it and you're just doing it, like I don't want to have all the weeds in my garden, and so I'm out picking weeds, and
Right.
that's squatting up and down, and that's giving me that activity, but it's also doing something that's important to me.
Right. And it's funny because Kim and I were just at a conference and both of us were in the back of the room stretching. Everyone else is sitting. And you go to these conferences, for this one was, conference is 4 or 5 days, and people are sitting the entire conference. The only movement they're getting is maybe walking from class to class. So just standing up, like Kim was doing in the back, stretching and moving, that all adds up, hour after hour after hour. So I've always said, that the saying that sitting is the new smoking. Be really conscientious of trying not to sit very long. I have a standing desk. I'm out of town right now, but I have a standing desk. So when I'm doing interviews or seeing clients, I'm standing. And when you're standing, you can still move around. You can do a little stretching. You can put a ball under your foot and roll your foot a little bit. You can balance on one leg. Same thing when you're in the kitchen cooking, you can sneak these movements in. You can do 5 push-ups off the counter, sneak things in throughout the day. But when you look at our lifestyle compared to our grandparents and great-grandparents, there's no comparison in terms of movement. One of the things I would always ask the seniors at the retirement homes is, hey, what was your activity level like? And they always said 100% of the time. They said, oh my gosh, I carried my brother or my sister on my back to school every day. It didn't matter the weather. And then I'd say, well, when you got home from school, what did you? Oh, well, we had to do chores. They all did chores. And I said, what did you do after the chores? Well, then our parents let us play a little. What did you do? Well, play volleyball or kick the can. So it was always something very physical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we have another question from Lindsay. Let's see. JP, why have I become more sensitive to touch, emotions, physical pain, being in the whole food plant-based, I'm assuming whole food plant-based diet? Was turned down by a very well-known psychologist in the Whole Foods community. Where do I start? Help.
Okay. And what do they mean by a sensitivity to touch? I'm not sure. Is that a nervous thing? I'm not sure what they mean, but you do become, you get a heightened sense of awareness, and your sensitivity almost increases to Spider-Man like reflexes. Like for me, I know this sounds funny, but like I feel sorry for the small letters in a sentence, because my sensitivity is thinking of things like that. So same thing with animals. Like I was at a client's house the other day, and she had some dogs that were rescued from that were going to be killed for meat. And they're very skittish and scared. And she said, JP, I've never seen this before. They're coming right up to you. They're coming right up to you, and they want to be around you. And it's like they can feel, your energy, because when you become very sensitive, you do have to be careful with your sensitivity level, because when you become hypersensitive, I've worked a lot with psychics, and psychics are so hypersensitive that they can't deal with all the energy coming in. So most of the psychics that I work with as clients are 300 pounds, drug addicts or alcoholics, because they don't have the ability to shut off all their absorbing. And so then they resort to drugs or some medication to calm themselves down. And so part of, as I'm working with clients, it's learning to regulate your emotions and your moods. And we do that through breathing. We do that through different exercises and work together. But it is kind of a gift as you transition to more whole food, plant-based diet, and even some more raw foods, that your senses become very heightened. But I think you're right. You do have to be careful. And I think I may know who the therapist is that didn't want to work with you, because that's very common. I know that a lot of these people don't believe in that. A lot of them don't believe in trauma also, just so you know that, which I find fascinating. So feel free to always give me a call or connect with me. I'm glad to try to help you one-on-one with that. But you're on the right path, doing whole food, plant-based, and don't be afraid of being sensitive, because it's a gift. Actually, it's definitely a gift. When I work with clients, I can always feel what they're feeling, and it helps me work with them. I've had some clients that I work with that are really known in our movement, and they've been probably 12 years. They've kept their 125 pounds off. They've done really well, and they're teaching now. And I'll call them up and I'll say, wow, I sense a lot of food there. And they start freaking out. They go, oh my God, JP, it's not my food. I'm having a party for friends and family, but I'm not eating any of it. Do you have cameras in my house? Are there cameras in my house? How do you know what's going on? And it's like, you just become very sensitive, that you can feel the energy sometimes of people. And it takes a while to get that way. And it's nothing mystical and magical. It's just that you're sensitive. It's no different than a dog being able to smell another dog a half mile away, right? We don't have that, but if we train ourselves, we can increase those levels of sensitivity. But that's a really good question. I love working with people like that are hypersensitive, because I find it a gift. And a lot of therapists, they get that vicarious trauma where they're absorbing the energy from their client. And that's a big, big problem when I work with therapists, because imagine that if you and I are doing a session together and you're dumping all this trauma, right? And all of a sudden our 50 minutes or hours up, and I only leave 5 minutes till my next client, and I'm going into the next session with that client, absorb all this trauma. So my being is different now. I'm not going to be able to help you as well as I could by having a calm, stable brain, especially if that client dumped a lot of trauma. If you had abuse as a child, and that client was talking about abuse as a child, right? You're taking it in and it's triggering you. And it's very common in the trauma world to have that happen, because a lot of therapists become therapists because they had trauma. And so they go into that field. And if you don't know how to regulate that, you're not a good therapist. You actually can be detrimental to your clients.
All right. Well, I think that this might be a good time for you to tell us how people can find you, what kinds of services you offer, so that, for the people who've been watching today, that they can access you and everything
Sure.
that you provide.
Well, there's a lot of free info online about me. I have my book, my first book, The Pillars of Health. You can always order that. You can get it at a library also too. So you want to get some free stuff. You can always do a session with me. I think the best way to contact me is my email, foods, FOODS, FORLIFEJP at Yahoo. So it's foodsforlifejp at yahoo.com. And glad to always do session with you that way. I think working with both of you and your team is also very important, because I think that the dietary component, you've got to really dial that in, and making sure, like you said, Kim, that, you're not taking, your meds, you really got to regulate that, because once you transition to a plant-based diet, your blood pressure is going to go down. Right. And maybe, you also have to have Coumadin if you're, taking a blood thinner. You got to watch that. People start popping all this EPA and DHA and these blood thinning things, or they're eating a ton of blueberries or taking a ton of aspirin. That's going to, contribute to thinning the blood too. So I think working with a good plant-based physician is key too. And then, I kind of supplement that. I don't do any medical stuff because I'm not a physician. So I just refer that out. I mainly work with you mentally and spiritually, and then from a fitness standpoint, and then it can help fine tune your diet and motivate you and inspire you to stay on the path.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, JP, for allowing us to speak with you today and learn more about you. And thank you, Dr. Scheuer, for helping me host this. It's been a pleasure. And thank you to everyone who watched and asked questions. We appreciate it. We are excited to do more of these interviews and webinars. Now, if you haven't had the pleasure of working with one of us doctors at Lifestyle Telemedicine, now might be the time. We would love to work with you, whether or not you're suffering from chronic lifestyle related diseases or conditions. Maybe you just need a plant-based doctor who is supportive of your lifestyle. Maybe you're on a lot of these medications and you're not sure what to do with them as you make these changes to your diet, well, please come visit us at lifestyletelemedicine.com. We do have 6 doctors now who cover almost all 50 states, DC, international. And please feel free, if you'd like, to just give us a call and talk to us and find out more about what we offer. 888-420-7284. Thank you again, both of you. And until next time, I'm Dr. Niki Davis with Lifestyle Telemedicine.
Sending love.
Bye, everyone.